sitting on a glorious time bomb. This thing is about to explode. Here, whether it's the next year or 2 or 5, who cares? Sooner than later. We know usually that from the Old Testament, God uses 7 years as a period of the harvest. So we might be looking at 7 years here very soon. That more will happen in 7 years than really. That's what the Lord said to me. He said to me, more will happen in the 7 years of the end time harvest than in the 7,000 years of man on the earth.
Wow.
That's what he said to me. And this is why when we begin to talk about the absolute of the fire, the absoluteness of the fire, that it will absolutely conquer everything. It'll burn up everything that's not of God. It'll absolutely conquer everything. People look at you like, what are you talking about? Because they don't see the other absolutes. They don't see the framework. Absolute of time. Absolute of the plan. Absolute of the plan of the harvest. Absolute of the climax. Absolute of the Lord's return. They don't see these very simple absolutes that are absolutely undeniable, unchangeable. They're coming. The time is here. But the Lord said to me, these things will be hidden from the eyes of the church because the church does not walk with the Spirit. The Spirit will bear witness to these things and confirm these things to our heart and make them a reality in our hearts, even though our heads will still spin and our heads will still try to grasp it. It will become a reassurance, and it will become a witness and an evidence in our hearts that we know that we're sitting on the moment of glory. The Lord called it the moment of glory of mankind, the moment of glory, of the glorious moment of history. And then he said this to me. He said, the coming of Jesus on the clouds of glory to catch away his harvest is the greatest event of 7,000 years in the earth. I said, wait a second. You telling me that the rapture is greater than the battle of Armageddon? He said, far greater. I said, you telling me the rapture is greater than the birth of Jesus, even the resurrection of Jesus? He said, far greater. He said, could not come before it, but it's far greater. He said, I said, why? Explain to me why. And he said to me, do you know the life of a farmer? I said, yes, my grandfather was a farmer, and he would sow corn in the field. He said, what was the greatest moment? When the rain came, when he plowed the fields, when he sowed the fields, when he watched the harvest grow, or when we finally reaped that harvest? What was the greatest moment for him? I said, when he reaped the harvest. I said, they were all great, but they all built up to the greatest one.
That's good.
Which is the harvest. They all a step up to, the greatest one was the harvest.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord said exactly the same. Then he reminded me of this, and people don't think about this. He's coming for the harvest of the earth. I challenge people, like I say in the Good Republic of Texas, I double dog dare you. Go back and study the principle of Pentecost, the harvest of God, that comes from the Old Testament, the harvest of the barley harvest of the field. Go and study that. Those of you like to study. Go and study the principle of that. And how they reap the harvest. They strip the field. Hardly anything slipped by their hands. 90, 92, 95% of that harvest was brought in. That's the principle of the harvest. That principle was transferred from the field to the Spirit on the day of Pentecost. Same principle.
Wow.
That same principle. Principle never changed. The principle of the absolute harvest. So, when the harvest is brought in, we've got over 7 billion people on the earth now. That'll grow to, probably in the next 10, 12, 15 years, probably grow to 8 billion people, or even more. We don't even know. The world population is actually absolutely exploding so fast. So here's the thing. So let's say there's 8 billion people, we get in over 7. The harvest of the Lord is somewhere between say 7 and 7.5. The rest of the people go through tribulation. Let's say it's 7. What about every person who was born again from the day of Pentecost in Jerusalem until that harvest? They come down from heaven, they are resurrected, they get their new bodies out of the grave and stand there transformed in glory. We are transformed in a twinkling of an eye, instantly changed. And at that moment, and the Lord, he started to go real wild when he talked to me about this. He said, in a moment's time, every person who ever said yes to the gospel of Jesus by faith and was born again will stand on the earth. I don't know, for a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, I don't know. Will stand on this earth. How many billions are that from Pentecost till now? 4, 5, 6, 7 billion? plus 7 billion. We're looking at 10, 12, 14, 15 billion people that will be in the earth. Okay? Let's say the harvest is 7 out of 8 billion. Let's say, I don't think it's that little. I think it's more. But let's say hypothetically, 7 out of the 8 billion. Okay? Then we get another 7, I'm speaking hypothetically, from heaven. So we got 14 billion people in the earth with transformed bodies in the glory of God, ready to fly. And there's 1 billion or half a billion dispersed into the corners of the earth, hiding from the fire and the glory. Those who are able to don't know how. And the Lord reminded me of that scripture, the whole earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Now you have 14 or 15 billion people on this earth transformed in their glorious body. Their glory. You have 14 billion glory plugs in this earth, standing on this earth. The Lord said to me, there will be an earthquake at that time. I said, why? He said, not because of anything negative. He said, because of the glory. He said, my son, can you imagine the earth literally be filled with billions of people full of the glory of God, all looking up as Jesus descends?
Wow.
He said, the whole earth will shake, but it will be a glorious shake. It will be a quake of glory. He said, and suddenly, as the Lord motioned for us to come, all 14 billion people will lift. He said the earth will bend on its axle. I said, I didn't even know there's such a thing. He said the earth will bend on its axle. He said, and when we all leave, when we all depart. I said, Lord. He said to me, what a moment do you think that is for Jesus?
Wow.
It is the moment of the great glory of his harvest. The harvest of salvation and faith, and of the harvest of the age of grace. He said it is the greatest moment for Jesus in the whole plan of salvation. It is his greatest moment.
Incredible.
You know, and so it takes the eyes of the Lord to open you to things like this and help you.